Artists often say they put a piece of their soul into their work. For Julianne, it felt like her work was taking pieces out of her. It all started with the canvas. She'd bought the large antique thing from an estate sale of a reclusive painter who had vanished back in the 1920s. The canvas was old, the fabric yellowed, but it just called to her. She set it up in her studio, a converted attic with a single skylight that let in the gray London rain. She decided to paint a portrait, just a simple study of a man sitting in a chair. But from the very beginning, the painting fought her. The paint dried way too quickly, cracking and peeling. The colors would shift overnight. A warm ochre would turn into a bruised, sickly purple by morning. Julianne blamed the humidity, the cheap oils, her own exhaustion, anything but the canvas itself. Then, the eyes appeared. She hadn't even started on the eyes yet, just sketched the empty sockets. But on the fourth morning, she walked into her studio and found them finished. They were hyper-realistic, far beyond her own skill. They were a pale, watery blue, bloodshot and terrified, and they were staring directly at the studio door. Julianne Frousset, her coffee cup shaking. Her first thought was that someone had broken in, maybe a prank by a jealous rival. She reached out and touched the paint. It was wet, fresh, angry and confused. She wiped the eyes off with a rag. Beneath the wet paint, the canvas was stained a deep, dark color. She painted over it again, covering the spot with a thick layer of black gesso. That night, she locked the studio door and pocketed the key, just to be safe. The next morning, her heart dropped. The black gesso was scratched off. Not peeled, scratched. Deep grooves were dug into the dried paint, like someone had used their fingernails. And the eyes were back. This time, they weren't just staring at the door. They were looking up in sheer terror. And the mouth. She hadn't painted a mouth, but now, a mouth was forming. It was a scream. A wide, silent, cavernous scream painted in shades of red that looked disturbingly like dried blood. A wave of nausea hit her. The face in the painting was becoming familiar. It wasn't the model she'd been using. The jawline, the hairline, that terrified expression, it looked like her father, who had died 10 years ago. Panicked, she grabbed a palette knife, intending to slash the canvas, to destroy this cursed thing. She raised the blade, but her arm froze midair. A sudden, overwhelming lethargy washed over her. Her muscles went slack, and the knife clattered to the floor. A voice whispered in her ear, not from the room, but from inside her own head. Finish, Italiano. Her hand moved on its own. It picked up a brush. It dipped it into the red paint. Julianne watched in horror, a prisoner in her own body, as her hand began to paint details onto the screaming figure. She painted bruises on its neck. She painted cuts on its cheeks. She realized with a sick jolt that she wasn't painting a portrait. She was painting a crime scene. Night fell, and still she painted. Her fingers bled, chafed raw against the brush handle. She was painting the background now. It was her studio. She painted the skylight, the easel, the door, and in the corner of the painted room, she painted a figure standing in the shadows. A tall, dark shape, with long, thin fingers. The figure in the painting was looking at the screaming man. Julianne's real eyes darted to the real corner of her studio. It was empty, but the painting insisted otherwise. Her hand moved faster, feverish. She painted the figure's face. Eat that noise, just hollow, black sockets. And it was smiling. Finally, at 3 a.m, her hand stopped. The painting was done. The man in the chair, her father, was dead in the painting. The dark figure was standing over him, but something was wrong. The perspective was shifting. Julianne leaned closer. The dark figure in the painting. It wasn't looking at her father anymore. It was looking out of the canvas. It was looking directly at her. A sound came from the corner of the room, the real corner. A soft, wet footstep. Julianne turned her head slowly. Standing in the shadows, exactly where she had just painted it, was the figure. Tall, eyeless, smiling. It held a paintbrush in its long, gray fingers. The brush was dripping with red. "My turn," it whispered. The last thing Julianne saw was the figure raising the brush, not to the canvas, but to the air right in front of her face, ready to paint her out of existence.